Okay, the book "Living on a Prayer: Big Songs, Big Life" is available to buy now. There's a purchasing link just below this video. I mean, it's you mentioned the song "I Was Made for Loving You" by Kiss. Is it true that Gene didn't like the song because he felt it somehow polluted the Kiss brand, and did Gene present any problems for you?
Well, the song was so strong he couldn't stop it.
Hmm.
But he did many times voice, his dislike for the song, and he just felt it was off brand, for Kiss.
Yeah,
But the
I guess it
fact,
was though, wasn't it? Really?
well, now it's sort of like that story of Picasso and Gertrude Stein.
Hmm.
She posed for this painting, very famous painting he did of her 85 times, and she never got to see the painting.
Hmm.
Finally, right towards the end, and he was getting ready to show it to her, he erased the face because he had gotten into cubism and repainted the face in an angular style, but the rest of it was realistic, the
Sure.
way the painting was. He had that style as well. And finally, she he lifted up the cloth so she could see it, and she said, "That doesn't look like me." And
Hmm.
he looked at her and he said, "It will."
So the
Me-
Kiss, you kind of
Meaning,
rebranded them.
yeah, that's not my style. Well, it is now, because "I Was Made for Loving You" is actually their biggest global international hit of all time.
Yeah, it's
I
massive.
went to see their final show. Uh, it was December 2nd in Madison Square Garden. It was very emotional for me and everyone there. And of course, Paul has his side of the stage and Gene has the other side of the stage. Paul's always, state what we call stage left,
Hmm.
even if you're looking at it, he's on the right. And he kept looking up at us, singing with the most, like vulnerable face. The show was truly majestic.
Yeah.
Uh, and I just love him to death. I mean, there would be no Desmond Child without Paul Stanley, because he's the one that discovered me and gave me that chance. And we changed the course of pop music with that one song,
Change,
unknowing.
yeah. You changed the course of history.
Yes, and one thing I did notice is that when he went to sing the song, before he sang it, he flew across the audience to the remote stage.
That's right, yeah.
And so and then I looked over at Gene and I realized he can't even be on the same stage when that song is sung. But I kind of, before I was hurt, that he didn't like the song, and he in fact went out, and when they made this album called The Elder, where they didn't use any outside songwriters, and he
Yeah.
said, "We don't need outside songwriters, like Bon Jovi and Aerosmith, you know, we can do it ourselves." And in fact, we put two guards at the front of the studio door to keep Desmond Child out. Okay, he didn't say it once. He said it like 100 times in a global publicity tour. And I started getting, everybody was sending me this quote. He said it the same way every time. And my feelings got hurt. So I called Paul up and I said, "Paul, why would he slag? Why would he attack someone who puts money in his pocket,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
loves Kiss? There's so many enemies of Kiss that he could attack. Why me?" He said, "Oh, well, Gene, I can't get, Gene." I said, "Well, I don't, and I don't understand it." I said, "Paul, you were there when he was saying this stuff. Why didn't you speak up?" And he said, "I can't control Gene." I said, "Well, you know what? You can tell him to go F himself, all right?"
Yeah, yeah.
And so, it was not a very nice conversation. And Paul wasn't defensive at all. Well, a few hours later, when I got back and I checked my answering machine, when we
Hmm.
had answering machines, there was a four-word message that said, "Hi, it's Gene. Sorry." Click. that was probably the first time in his entire life he apologized for anything, right? And apology accepted. And I actually have become much closer to him. Every time I see him, he's very warm, and he comes up to me. He's very, very, kind of commanding. He's already tall, and then he wears high shoes. So I'm like almost 6 foot, and he's like, whatever, 6'4", and he
Mm,
looms over you with this hair that looks like, like a helmet.
mhm.
And he always like takes my hand and kind of crushes it like a little bit too much. And he comes nearer and nearer and nearer, and he says, "You're a very handsome young man, very, very talented." And then he walks away.
Well, yeah, that's certainly something, isn't it?
I said, "Oh God, there's Gene. Oh wow, he's coming. He's walking towards me, and like I go, oh God, please don't squeeze my hand so hard."
How much did you contribute to Alice Cooper's Poison album?
Well, I co-wrote
The
almost every
Trash album, sorry, Trash.
Trash. Yeah, I co-wrote almost every song with him from scratch,
Okay.
and I think we had one song that he had brought with him that he had written, I think, with Kip Winger from before,
Hmm.
and I produced the album.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's how involved I was with the album Trash. And I also invited all the artists that I had been having success with to be on the record, and they did it. I mean, everybody loves Alice, but they did it for me as a favor because I had put them all on top.
Wow,
So,
yeah.
it was Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, Joan Jett, they all contributed and sang and played on the album Trash. And so the album he had made before the one I did sold 15,000 copies.
Okay.
Then he got a new deal at Epic Records, and the A&R guy, Bob Pfeiffer, through my publisher, who was his wife, got me in on, to produce, to write and produce Alice Cooper. And so the only problem was that he wanted to be a co-writer too, which actually was prohibited by Sony rules. A&R people were prohibited on co-writing on their artists' material so they could be objective on
Yeah.
the song, not just pick the songs that they co-wrote on. So I said no, which, got him, very resentful. And he actually tried to cut me out of the mixing process. And when they turned the tapes over to the mixers, they said, "We can't do this without Desmond. These are, 48 tracks.
Yeah.
Where does one thing go or the other go?" So finally, and I was fighting from my end, going crazy, to, even though I'd had number one songs, I was, this guy was trying to push me out of the picture, even at the mix of
Hmm.
track. And so, what happened was my album sold, he goes from 15,000 records to 4.3 million records
Yeah.
with that, because also it had all of those big stars on it. So we gathered all of their fans, they all bought the record, right? And so then for the next album, I'm fired
Okay.
because he wanted to be the one co-writing and co-producing the album, the A&R guy.
Right.
And Alice, you know, he's, a very passive person, really. All he really thinks about is, and especially at that time, was keeping his sobriety and also playing golf. And, he was just said, "No, no, this is what you're going to do now." And it was like, I was in shock. I had a whole new direction to point him in.
Yeah.
And so then they made this album with songs that they wrote with, and the producer was Peter Collins, I think was his name, a British producer
I think so, yeah.
that smoked little cigars and stuff in the studio. And I didn't understand what they were doing. And that album sold like 85,000 records, and they dropped it. Alice Cooper. So how do you go from 4.5 million to, or almost 4.5 million to 85,000 and then be dropped? I don't understand why they didn't just like recover and come back to me, to make trash too.
Sure, sure.
And but I had this whole other direction that I wanted to go in, which was I was really getting into this electronic kind of Nine Inch Nails, kind of like more like what was happening, in kind of alternative. I don't even know what you call it. It was industrial
Yeah, yeah,
rock,
yeah, yeah.
which I thought fit his, underground image, you
Sure.
know, and I really wanted to point us in that direction.
Hmm.
And and sure enough, the whole industry went in that direction. Electronic music and, especially in rock, you
Yeah,
know, became took over. So it was pointing him beyond, the pop rock of the 80s into the 90s. That's what I wanted to do. And
yeah,
I didn't get a chance to do that.
yeah.
Uh, there's always hope, that he'll come back to me and we can make trash too.
Maybe. Well, he's just put out a new album, hasn't he? Just recently.
Yes, yes, he's putting out albums, but
You
you
ready
know,
for Trash too?
I'm ready to and it was funny because I had mentioned it and he went online and said, Stop talking trash. Stop talking trash." Uh, I think that trash, let's say there's trash, you know, the first one and there's trash two. I think that could be a Broadway show because
Yeah.
the songs were written to be from the point of view of this character,
Hmm.
Alice Cooper. And he goes through all of these things and he's such a bad boy, but then he always gets punished in the end. So if he cuts the head off a doll, then of course it's his head that has to go in the guillotine.
Hmm.
See? So there's always a moral to the story,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think he's just captured the world's imagination
He has. Yeah.
because he's an archetype of Pan, of the devil. And he has so much fun with that. And we know it's all tongue in cheek.
I've got to ask you, what was Steven Tyler like to work with? He doesn't strike me as the easiest guy to work with.
Well, first of all, geniuses aren't easy,
Sure.
because they are doing a math inside their mind. They're like 10 steps ahead of everyone else, so it's hard for them to be always being dragged back to reality
Mhm.
where we live. And so, that's the thing. I mean, he's endlessly creative, but he's also a very sweet person, a people pleaser. And, we had our little tiffs and fights and things when you know, when we were trying to come up with the lyrics for What It Takes. He said, we sort of got stumped and he said, well, maybe I should call Diane Warren and bring her over here, like she was going to solve our little, conundrum. I
Sure.
got so mad, I walked out. He had to come chasing after me. I love Diane. I mean, she was one of my best friends, and she's also my biggest rival.
Yeah.
And I thought it ironic because they had recorded a song of hers that they didn't co-write on called "I Don't Want to Miss a Thing," that became their biggest song after "Dream On"
Sure. Sure.
because it was for a movie. It was for a movie.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
I'm getting.
so he had gone in People magazine and said, "Oh, well, Diane Warren, she's, like a pop writer." He was like slagging her when she helped bring their career back like bigger than ever with her song,
Yeah.
you know? And so for then all of a sudden he was like, "Oh, well, we should get Diane Warren in here." Oh my God, I was so mad. But anyway, we finished, we were doing the song What It Takes, and he put this football helmet on that had earphones inside. and he was, what a way to, with the visor down, like what a way to cut himself off from us, right?
Sure.
So he's playing drums and singing, and we're just kind of I'm on keyboard and Joe is on guitar, and we're like following along with his like stream of consciousness. And then he went home for dinner. This was after our fight. Then he went home for dinner, and then when he came back, Joe and I had pieced together this 25 piece of stream of consciousness, where he didn't repeat one thing. It was from one thing to the other, zigzag, change keys, go this way, go that way. And we created What It Takes. And he came back and loved it because I took pieces and just repeated them and to make sections. And then we finished out the song. And at the end, maybe he was purring up to me because he knew it had been mean. And he said, "Now we get to live forever together in this song."
But Joe Perry, isn't it Joe Perry that says that you came up with the title for Dude Looks Like a Lady?
Yeah, but that's not true.
Okay.
And there were two autobiographies that were done before I wrote mine. First one was Stevens, and in it he takes 2 pages to describe me as like I was like Juan Valdez. He said, "Well, he came in here with a handlebar mustache." I've never had a handlebar mustache. Okay, like I was like the Colombian, coffee farmer in the commercials,
Sure.
you know, pulling a donkey, which was a little bit, I'm Cuban, but I'm I I wasn't as he described, okay?
Sure.
And then he said, "Well, we already had the song," and he just wrote sprinkled a few little words in there and hardly did anything. But, we had to split the song with him in thirds, anyway, blah, 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 like just griping about me.
Hmm.
Then Joe came out with his autobiography that was co-written by my eventual co-writer, David Ritz,
Yeah.
where he says, "Well, Desmond is the one that came up with Dude Looks Like a Lady." It's like, not true. And so the true story is in my autobiography,
Hmm.
Living on a Prayer, Big Songs, Big Life. And it goes like this. The very first day I came to meet them, they were in this big airplane hangar warehouse with these huge, like 2-story steel doors. And it was in the middle of the day. They had swept me up at the airport, brought me to the thing. They didn't want to write with me. They were just trying to appease their A&R guy, John Clodner, who was
Yeah.
like pushing me on them. And the door swings open, of this ray of light comes in from the outside, and I walk in, and then I see Steven coming towards me, and this ray of light, all lit up. And he had this big smile and he said in his face, and he says, "Come on, come with me, come with me." So we go to the side of the stage, and Joe was there with his sound guy, his monitor guy, and they had just looped a backwards guitar. So it was going anana, 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 anana.
Hmm.
And then Steven started singing "Cruising for the Ladies," nana, nana, cruising for the ladies, okay?
Yeah.
And then they stopped, and then they looked at me. I mean, we still hadn't said hello or how do you do, nothing. They said, "Well, what do you think of that?" And I said, "It's bad."
Okay.
And to break the ice, I said, "I don't think that Van Halen would put that on the B side of their worst record to see if I could get them to laugh." No, no. Joe was like, "No, like he poses on the album covers, it's like sideways, looking at me. Now he's like really looking at me sideways." And he said, then Steven says, "Well, because he's the people pleaser. Well, when I first came up with that riff, I was singing 'Dude Looks Like a Lady.'" And I said, "What? Dude looks like a lady?" And Joe said, "But we don't know what that means. And we don't want to insult the gay community." I said, okay, dude, I'm gay, not insulted. Tell me, how did you come up with dude looks like a lady? And
Uh,
he explained that he had gone to this bar on the shore, and there was this, it was an empty bar, it was like happy hour, but nobody was there. And they were there with their, all their roadies and stuff, and everybody drinking their non-alcoholic beverages.
yeah,
And at the end of this long, lonely bar was one person, this vision of loveliness, this platinum mullet haired, goddess with porcelain skin and curvy figure and, bare arms and uh, jewelry, rings, and black nails. And, they were all going, oh my God, who's going to go up? And they started drawing straws, who was going to go up and hit on her, right? So then she turns around and it's Vince Neil of Motley Crue. And so Steven said, he instantly started saying, ooh, that dude looks like a lady. Dude looks like a lady. Dude looks like a lady. And he loves alliteration.
yeah, yeah.
My nickname for him is Yabba Dabba Doo. Because
Okay.
when he's out, he'll go, Yabba Dabba 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 Doo. So like Fred Flintstone, right?
Yeah.
And he actually put it in a song, one I didn't co-write, Yabba Dabba Doo. Okay, whatever. And so, um, so then, I said, listen, dude looks like a lady is fantastic title. Let's follow this. So walked into a bar on the shore. Her
Mhm.
picture graced the grime on the door. She was a long lost love at first bite. Da 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 da. And then, um, he says, he goes into it and he goes, Donna, Donna, dude looks like a lady, dude looks like a lady. So meaning the stripper
Mhm.
was a trans, right? Or at least a drag queen,
Yeah, yeah.
transvestite. And not trans, because, that can mean many different things
Mhm.
today, but 37 years ago, it was more like, like you go into a gay bar and there's somebody up there singing "I Will Survive," right?
Yeah, yeah.
So, so then the moral of the story is the second verse that says, "Never judge a book by its cover, or who you gonna love by your lover."
Sure.
And so, had the body of a Venus man. Imagine my surprise, dude. But the secret of the song is that he doesn't run away,
Right.
because he starts going, "My funky lady, I like it, like it, like it, like that."
Sure.
So that was revolutionary. Usually in such a story, the straight guy just runs out the door all insulted and freaked out.
No.
No, he stays.
Huh.
So I don't know if people really picked up on how kind of uh, revolutionary that was, and accepting,
Yeah, yeah.
and and like, never judge a book by its cover, or who you're going to love by your lover. I mean, that's just by who you think would be your lover.
Yeah.
And I just love that, and we were so ahead of our time with that, and that was the song that brought them back,
Wow.
even on permanent vacation.
Yeah, yeah. Were you
And even
thinking,
what
sorry,
even John Claudner, the A&R guy, got in on the video dressed in a wedding dress with a long beard.
were you thinking at all of maybe the Kinks' Lola? You know, the story of the Kinks' Lola song.
No, I really didn't really know that song so much. I didn't. Later, people brought it up. Oh, that one's about, transgender something or other. But I never was referring to that. To me, it was like I knew from my own experience, you
Yeah,
know, having, been in New York City, having played, every gay dive, in New York, knowing drag queens, having slept with some, whatever. It's never judge a book by its cover, or who you
absolutely,
gonna love by your lover. Once
absolutely.
that wig comes off, anything can happen.
I've got one question to ask you. Last question to ask you is what prompted Meatloaf to vandalize your car?
He was, tired, wasn't thinking, and he pulled, it was like it's the two spots were side by side. He had the first spot,
Yeah.
said Mr. Loaf, and mine said Mr. Child. And my car was a very beautiful Arnage T Bentley, like the kind the Queen Mother was driving around in,
Sure.
right? Black, looked like a limo, like a limo, right?
Yeah.
And he had a more modest Mercedes. So, when he like pulled out, he went like this and just scraped the whole side of the car, you know, but he didn't admit it.
Right.
That was the thing. And so, the next day I said, "Hey, do you know anything about how my car got scratched?" He goes, "No, don't know nothing." And so he comes back the next, and I'm like, "Come on, he did it."
Mm.
Right. So the next day I said, I got good news. They have the video now of who they tracked down the video from the surveillance cameras of who scratched my car. And his eyes were like darting side by side, and he's got at the mic. This is what he's getting ready to sing. And I gave him that good news, and he went, I said, "What? Excuse me, could you say that a little bit louder?" I crashed your fucking car, you know. And so then, of course, with a car like that, it's you have to paint the entire car. So it was like a $5,000 paint job,
Mm.
because there's no way of just fixing the door, because it was like the whole thing is like one thing. So that's the story of the car.
Well, why
But
was Meatloaf so pissed with you generally?
because I wasn't Jim Steinman,
Okay.
because he should have made
He
Bad.
hated that album though, didn't Bad Out of Hell 3, he didn't he hated that album, didn't he?
Well, he approved every song. He sang every song.
Right.
He was with us for 9 months. He said he loved it. But this is what happened. He needed to get an album out there so he could tour, because he was in the middle of a lawsuit with Jim Steinman over the name Bat Out of Hell, because Jim had written a Broadway show, wanted to call it Bat Out of Hell,
Right.
and Meatloaf had nothing to do with it. But
Right.
Meat was contention was, this is my brand name. You can't just go out there and make a musical with my brand name. And Jim Steinman said, well, you forget the fact that I actually wrote those words. And it's, you didn't write one note of the music that you sang. Bad Out of Hell is mine. So they were in a tremendous lawsuit for a couple of years.
Sure.
In the meantime, he had to make a record. And, the idea was, well, I'll show him. I'll do Bat Out of Hell 3 without him. And so, but it was more complicated than that. They made me record 7 Jim Steinman songs that had been on other people's records, like Celine Dion's "It's All Coming Back to Me Now," duet with Marion Raven, and this and that, and from his Broadway show, and from this vampire Broadway show that he had done, from his own solo record, Jim Steinman's solo record. And they gathered these 7 songs, and none of them less than 6 minutes long. And they went through all these modulations and keys. It was very, very difficult thing. And then I wrote with my collaborators amazing songs for him, "Blind as a Bat," and "If God Could Talk." I mean, like, so many great songs. And the album took 9 months to make
Yeah.
and cost over $2 million,
Wow.
because he kept, he first wanted his stage band to be the band, but it wasn't great. So I had to re-record every instrument,
Mhm.
sometimes multiple times, and then demon choirs and pipe organs, and 60-piece orchestras, and all of these things that he was demanding. And in the end, I mean, also the way we were recording at a very expensive studio, he wasn't happy with an engineer that also did Pro Tools. He didn't trust Pro Tools. So he
Sure.
wanted one guy just do sound, $1,000 a day, and another guy just do Pro Tools, $750 a day. Then the studio itself was, $1,200 a day. So then he, you know, was having a hard time singing. And I kept telling him, you need to, practice. I brought the voice teacher to the stars, Eric Vitro, who I'd gone to college with. And Eric would come every afternoon and just sit there. Finally, midway through the album, he said, okay, uh, show me what you can do. Suddenly, he started taking voice lessons and really depending on him. And his voice came to life. So we had to re-record all the vocals again from the beginning because now he had a different, fantastic, he was back.
Yeah, yeah.
And listen to the record, it's very well sung, you know? And so, all of these complications, but in the meantime, deep down, he felt guilty because once he resolved things with with Jim and he started seeing that Jim was health was failing, he
Uh-huh.
felt incredibly guilty. So it wasn't until the last few years, maybe even after Jim died, that he took Bat Out of Hell off of Spotify. It was available, Bat Out of Hell 3 off of Spotify, and started saying things like, Bat Out of Hell 3 doesn't exist. But he liked it fine for like 10 years in between. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? It's like it was all this like terrible, it was a love affair gone wrong, between these two people, their souls. And they made a record, which I think is his final record, that were the songs that Jim was saving for Bat Out of Hell 3.
Really.
And in fact, on the cover, it's the back of the two of them kind of walking into like hell's, hell's brimstone and fire and, whatever end of time kind of thing. And I think it's called Larger Than Both of Us or something. I forget the name of it.
Uh-huh.
And so I was used. They didn't put my name on the back of the cover. They put it somewhere little on the inside thing. And then on the back of the inside CD was in very large letters, a love letter to Jim Steinman, dedicated to Jim Steinman. So him and his manager were trying to make it seem as though Jim had produced the record. Never would mention me.
Mm-hmm.
So, it was like very, very painful. He didn't care about me.
Mm-hmm.
So I threw a wrap party for him and all this, and he left early and just didn't even speak to Jennifer Hudson, who was getting ready to win an Oscar for
Sure.
Dreamgirls, and who I got on the record, to sing on the record,
Mm-hmm.
and just didn't appreciate me at all. And maybe he was a bit homophobic too, because
Sure.
he was very right wing.
Right.
So sometimes he would come up from behind me and grab my hair and pull my head back and stick his tongue down my throat, like, because he was trying to like make up for being a bad boy and thinking that because I'm gay, I would like that. Or like, sometimes straight men think that any gay guy thinks they're attractive and they're after them. Like, no, we're a bit pickier than that, you know? And it's crazy behavior. And I I did do crazy things after that. I produced Scorpions, I produced the Rasmus, but really after that, I mean, I'm doing a Rasmus record now, but this is the last album I'll ever make unless it's Trash 2. So I mean, it's a great record, but I don't want to, I'm getting too old for that, to be in the studio at 2 a.m. doing power chords. I can't do that anymore. I
Sure.
just turned 70, so I have to like live so I can meet my grandchildren. My sons had to sit me down and say, you need to like stop, because it's like I have so many interests and I'm a perfectionist, so I follow everything through to the end.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
never say no to anything because I grew up poor. So, anybody who walks through the door, I write with them. Like, no, you have to be more selective. That person doesn't even have a record deal. What are you doing? You know? So that's what's happening with me. And, I've been working on a documentary of my life.
Hmm.
And the core of it is the show in Greece, because it's like the one night I get to be a star. So
Wonderful.
thinking of that, and then it's back and forth in time and telling my story and all of that. And I already have 20 interviews banked, with all the people that I've worked with.
Sure.
And gosh, I wish that I could have interviewed Meatloaf.
Well, it's a wonderful story, even if you didn't interview Meatloaf. I'll reiterate what I said at the start. Living on a Prayer, Big Songs, Big Life. That very book is available to buy now. There is a purchasing link just beneath this video. I certainly urge you to give it a read. It's a wonderful read. Desmond, thank you so much for your time.
Yes, and folks can follow me on Instagram at desmond.child. And it's really me. I'm there like doing these things all the time. My husband's like, get off that phone, but I'm hooked. I have 1.2 million very personal fans who are my friends, my best friends.
Well, we're all now looking forward to Trash 2.
Oh no, now Alice is going to call me and say, stop talking trash.
Thank you so much for your time. You have enjoy the rest of your day anyway. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, all the best. Bye bye.